And welcome, everyone. I'm Steve Gifford. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Brandi Mandato. Brandi is a candidate for state senate for the 34th Senate District in Connecticut. 34th District goes from Wallingford, North Haven, down into East Haven, then parts of Durham and North Branford. Brandi is the endorsed Democratic candidate, actually endorsed Working Families Party candidate as well for the seat. She's a first-time political candidate for this, and we're going to take some time to meet Brandi and learn a little more about her. So Brandi, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Can you, first of all, just tell us about, you're a North Haven resident, like me, you actually live just a couple blocks away.
I do.
Can you tell us a little about your sort of journey that brought you here to North Haven now?
A surprising journey that brought me to politics, but I think a pretty common journey to North Haven. So born and raised in Greater New Haven, I graduated from Hamden High School. Growing up in Hamden High School and living in New Haven, I got a really clear sense early on what it looked like to have access to resources and opportunity, and what it looked like when you didn't have those things. And so my stepdad was an electrician at Metro North, and we would take the train all the time into the city from New Haven. And we would pass tent cities where people were living on the side of the tracks. And then we would pass a Bentley dealership. And then we would get into New York City. And back then in Grand Central, there were people that would be sleeping on the benches. And I had lots of questions as a kid and didn't really understand why things were that way. And then you would step outside into this city where it felt like anything was possible. And so coming back home, I wanted to do whatever I could to make sure that all of us had access to better opportunities and better choices. And so I spent 20 years, my career in the nonprofit sector, really working on that kind of economic mobility and access to the labor market. And that's taken me all over the country to work on programs in various states and cities at the national level. And I was working and living in New York City when COVID hit. And I had just had a baby and was pregnant. And so by the end of 2020, I had 2 babies, and my husband and I were at least 2 hours away from family. And we thought, this isn't close enough. And we decided to move back home to Connecticut. And my brother at the time had just bought a house in North Haven. My sister was living in North Haven. My parents were living in North Haven. And we were driving around one day and found the perfect house immediately in between all of them. And so we knew that this was the place for us. And that's what brought us back here.
That is amazing. So I want to talk more about your work, but first I know because we just passed Labor Day recently, and I know you've talked about the importance of your stepfather's job and role in the union. Can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, so he was with IBEW Local 90 for 30 years and served as an electrician at Metro North. He played various leadership roles in the union, and several members of my family are union members. So I have a brother-in-law that's a member of the Carpenters Union. I was looking back at pictures recently to think about like what got me to this point. And in every picture, from picnics and birthday parties, and sometimes an occasional wedding, someone is there with work boots on or scrubs and their spackle on their jeans, and a union number and logo on their hat or their t-shirt. So growing up, we saw what it meant to be organized, what it meant to fight for workers' rights, because it's what was getting food on the table and the rent paid. So my commitment to workers was really started when I saw, again, that opportunity and access gap, and then was just emboldened by my family's commitment to lifting up their community and seeing this really as a fight for all of us.
Got it. So I know you, outside of your professional life, you've been very active in North Haven, not as an elected person, but just as a concerned citizen. I want to get to that in a minute. You mentioned your professional work in workforce development. Can you talk a little about both what that is and some of the things you've accomplished there?
So really simply put, workforce development is a fancy way of saying career opportunities and options. And those really start in the K through 12 system, and then are connected to training and learning opportunities all the way up through graduate school and apprenticeships. And for me, what was important to focus on was choice. So I was the first person in my family to go to college. I remember showing up to the University of New Haven on the first day, and I'd gotten in because I got good SAT scores, and wrote a really good essay. And they said, "Oh, great, what's your major?" And I said, "What's a major?" And I remember feeling so out of place in that moment, and I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. So I immediately got to working at that. My first job was working with young people who were in foster care or dual diagnosed, so managing mental health diagnoses and then another disorder, and making sure that we gave them access to rotational internships and rotational first jobs, so they got to see what the full breadth of work and career could look like. And from then, I've spent, again, the last 20 years working with all kinds of folks from all kinds of backgrounds to make sure that they have access to training, education, and access to pathways to careers that they're passionate about, and really broadening our horizons. I think what the middle class looks like has so been shaped by what we tell young people is possible, and what we tell people, particularly young people, is good, and what's a good high quality job. And that's shifted over the years. The sort of understanding of what unions can do has shifted, and that hasn't been an accident. That's been a really targeted attack on workers. An understanding of what a good job means. So I worked in the Bay Area for a little while, and there were a lot of, well, you won't get a pension, but you'll get a beer tap and a foosball table. And growing up in New Haven with a union family, I was like, that is not a
Right.
quality job. It's also like, funnily, when they're like, oh, there's a food truck outside, I was like, oh, a food truck outside here in the Bay Area? Because I was thinking of the canteen truck that used to pull up to like
Gut truck.
the
Sure.
factory that my grandmother worked at as kids. And we loved to get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches there, not like an Indian street food cart that was very fancy and delicious, but just not what I was used to. And sort of bring that all back home, the way that I lived that, so I did all of this work, but the way that I lived that is that I got to be an example and like a guinea pig in many ways to help my brothers and sisters see what was possible, and to help them navigate complicated, in some ways difficult to understand systems like financial aid, like what it means to take a particular major, what career paths look like, what technical training looks like. And so all of my brothers and sisters after me have completed either technical training, an apprenticeship, or their degrees. So I have three sisters that are nurses. I have a brother that has a master's degree and works as a social worker. Everyone in my family has been able to pursue a career that matters to them.
Well, so we're gonna on a future episode we're going to go into policy, but I can never avoid an excuse to go down a labor a labor rabbit hole. What are some of the in your work? What are the sort of systemic barriers you find, or some of the most common issues you have with people you're helping for finding jobs or finding education and things?
Yeah. I think for a while, a term that was thrown around a lot was the skills gap. And we've sort of rebutted that there is really an opportunity gap. So when we provide young people access to affordable education and training, all of a sudden we have talent pools that fill those empty jobs. When we really invest in K through 12 and prepare folks for what comes next, we find that we broaden our talent pool. And in a place like Connecticut that has so many colleges and universities, where we have so many folks coming in here to learn, we see a lot of employers pop up, a lot of large employers who want access to that talent pool. And so just like in my work in many other states and here in Connecticut, it's also about making sure that our local homegrown talent pool is prepared for jobs of today, jobs of the future, and that there's access to ongoing training and education. So making sure that young people who are more seasoned in their career, can stay in front of our evolving labor market, our evolving jobs. I think they say that most statistics are made up, but the statistic is
73%.
Yeah, 73. Is that like at least 80% of the jobs that will exist 20 years from now, we don't know what they are yet, right? And so it's teaching a particular skill set. It's teaching people how to learn, because that lifelong learning is going to be so critical. But at its heart, it's about access. It's about affordability, and it's about choice.
Now, stepping aside from your professional work, one of the things I know you've been very involved in North Haven, just as a citizen, as a member of the community, and especially around North Haven Pride. Can you talk a little about sort of where that came from and kind of where it stands now?
Yeah. When I moved to North Haven, I was really lucky to find some incredible families. So when you move around as an adult, it's hard to make friends. And what everyone told me was, oh, you've got kids. As soon as they start school, you'll make friends. And it was true. As soon as we sort of started daycare, we got to meet a lot of great people. And I met a handful of families who had been here their entire lives or for a very long time, and were struggling to navigate the public school system. And in some cases, different community groups. And part of that reason was because there was sort of a feeling about the LGBTQ community that was not inclusive. Or there was a perception and an experience on behalf of these families, but a perception that North Haven sort of wasn't a place where the LGBTQ community would be welcomed and embraced. And a little bit of history that proved that to be true. So we came together to think about how do we support the community and allow it to grow in ways that ensure all of our children can thrive and grow up to be their best, most authentic selves. And that was the catalyst for North Haven Pride. And what we've learned over the last, it hasn't even been 2 years. It's been, I think, 19 months now since we first came together and decided that this was something that we could contribute to the community. We have raised tens of thousands of dollars for youth programming. We have one of the most well-attended youth LGBTQ groups in the state. We've hosted 2 North Haven Pride celebrations. Our last celebration had over 2,500 people attend. And some of that was because of the immediate embrace from the community, town leadership.
For people who didn't get a chance to attend one of the 2 Pride celebrations on North Haven Green, can you talk just visually what that looked like?
It looked like a whole lot of joy. It was a really beautiful event. Lots of queer families in the community, lots of queer elders. We had folks who had never come out before because they'd lived in North Haven their whole lives and weren't sure that they would be accepted for the first time at 80 years old, come out. Mm-hmm. And in their own home were able to be themselves and just celebrated that. We also saw young families who felt safe and like they could just celebrate and dance. We had musicians and animals, and there were puppies and face painting. It was a great fair and a great day, and I think people just came out to celebrate and to celebrate North Haven.
What was some of the feedback you got from the community, and some of the impact you saw from you and the other organizers of Pride setting us up, do you think?
Yeah, a lot of positive feedback. So we also had a ton of support from the business community, so diversifying their clientele, diversifying their customers. We had feedback from community-based organizations that were there, that they were able to connect with folks that they needed to work with. We heard from young people that this was, again, the first time they felt like they could be their most authentic self. We heard from families who were excited to be in North Haven and maybe learned about, oh, there's a dance class in town I didn't know about, or there's this group I didn't know about, or this business I want to take advantage of that is friendly to the community. So just a lot of community building and a lot of joy.
Got it. So Brandi, as we wrap it up, is there anything that, as we wrap up this episode, I should say, is there anything that voters of Wallingford, North Haven, East Haven should know about Brandi as a person?
I talk a lot about how I'm the oldest of 8 because I think it really does give a sense of why I've done the work that I do and why I'm so committed to supporting working families. I started doing this work as an effort to make things better for the people that I loved. And as I worked at larger organizations and as I started to work on national issues, I realized that like the people I care about are Americans. They're all of us. And so I am looking at political office for the first time because I believe it is an incredible lever for change. And I know that we need people in Hartford that are fighting for all of us. Life is hard right now. It is hard to go out into the grocery store and spend hundreds of dollars more than you expected to. It is hard to get an electric bill that is shockingly high. And we need to have real solutions in Hartford that center working people.
Perfect. Well, Brandi Mandato, candidate for 34th State Senate District, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tune in next time when we'll dig into, frankly, all the issues that you teed up so nicely there. Thank you so much for joining us.